Sophia woke earlier than usual, her senses gently nudged awake by the soft light filtering through the bedroom curtains. Normally, she adored these quiet moments before life's bustle kicked in, the sweet smell of linen, the distant hum of traffic, the promise of a new day. Yet today, the air felt heavier, thick with an unspoken tension. She couldn't pinpoint the source of her unease, but something inside her whispered caution. She heard Marcus in the kitchen. Pots clanked, the kettle whistled softly. In the past, she might have smiled at the idea of her husband making breakfast. He wasn't the culinary type, so any effort on his part usually ended in burnt toast or watery eggs. But this morning sounded different. Every movement in the kitchen was measured, precise, as if he were carefully orchestrating each clang and clatter. When he finally came in, balancing a tray with toast, fruit slices, and a steaming mug of tea, Sophia feigned surprise and delight. "Breakfast in bed? This is new," she teased, trying to keep her voice light. Marcus smiled back, his gaze steady but guarded. "I wanted to do something special," he said simply. As Sophia accepted the tray, a subtle, almost unpleasant odor wafted from the teacup. She stared at the surface of the tea, nothing looked off. A swirl of steam revealed no lumps or discoloration. Yet a prickling sensation along her arms insisted something was amiss. She faked a tiny sip, just enough to wet her lips, the taste strangely metallic. Still, she smiled. She was determined not to show any alarm. Even though they were married, she'd grown to trust her instincts, and those instincts were screaming now. Something about Marcus's controlled posture, the peculiar smell of the tea, the heavy quiet of the house, it set her heart pounding. She told herself she'd look into it later, push the moment to see if her suspicions were wrong. But she knew, in that very moment, her life was about to change forever. Sophia carefully placed the teacup back on the tray, pretending to have had her fill. The rim of the cup had a small chip, barely noticeable unless you knew what to look for. Marcus saw her studying the flaw. "Oh, that old cup," he said. "I know you love it. You've always called it your lucky mug." In truth, Sophia had never referred to it as her lucky mug. She had a different mug she used regularly, a bright, floral one her sister had gifted her. This chipped one was actually something she rarely touched. How did Marcus get the idea it was her favorite? A flicker of confusion crossed her face, but she masked it quickly. "Right," she responded softly, unsure how to question him without sounding paranoid. The moment felt delicate, like stepping onto thin ice. Marcus had a certain intensity in his eyes she couldn't quite decode. She tried to recall if she'd ever used that mug before. Possibly once, during a hurried morning when all other cups were in the dishwasher. But she certainly had never labeled it as lucky or special. Why was Marcus pushing this narrative now? She let her fingers glide over the uneven edge of the porcelain. "Yes, it's quite a treasure," she added, forcing a light laugh. Marcus responded with his own forced chuckle, then leaned forward to pluck a stray crumb from the tray. It was an odd gesture, too, attentive. Sophia's heart pounded harder. The suspicion that the tea might be spiked was growing stronger, but she needed more than a gut feeling. She needed some kind of proof. For now, she filed the chipped cup conversation away. She made a silent vow to keep watch, to look for every puzzle piece Marcus might be leaving behind. As she rose from the bed to place the tray on the nightstand, she glanced back at him. He stood tall, hands in his pockets, lips pressed together. He wasn't smiling anymore. That flicker of intensity was still there, dark and dangerous. Maybe, she thought, the cup wasn't just chipped. Maybe it was carefully chosen, a subtle mark of something far more sinister. Days slipped by, and Sophia began noticing strange changes in her body and mind. She'd be cooking and suddenly forget an ingredient. She'd walk into a room and feel her head spin, as though the floor tilted beneath her. The dizziness was abrupt, unsettling, and often accompanied by a wave of nausea. Initially, she attributed these episodes to stress. She'd been juggling a demanding job at the local gallery, plus social obligations with Marcus's associates. But as the headaches grew sharper, and her short-term memory started fracturing in odd ways, she decided to see a doctor. The medical tests came back clean, no sign of viruses, hormonal imbalances, or neurological disorders. "It might be anxiety," the doctor said gently. "When was your last vacation?" Sophia merely forced a chuckle, knowing a vacation was out of reach. Marcus had a big project on the horizon, and she was swamped with gallery events. Plus, truth be told, she didn't exactly want to travel alone with him right now. At night, the symptoms worsened. She would suddenly sit upright in bed, drenched in sweat, mind racing. A half-remembered dream of swirling shadows haunted her. She kept telling herself it was just exhaustion, but her gut twisted with the sense that someone was deliberately tampering with her mind. She recalled the taste of that strange metallic tea. Was it the same flavor as the mild bitterness she tasted in her mouth when she brushed her teeth each morning? Could that bitterness be a residue of something else, lingering in her system? As the symptoms stacked up, so did her paranoia. Sophia found herself checking the color of her saliva, smelling her drinks before taking a sip, and analyzing every tiny detail in the house. She even considered hiring a private investigator. But that idea felt extreme. After all, this was her husband she was suspecting. The man she'd sworn to love and trust. Yet the dizziness, the confusion, the forgetfulness, it all pointed to something more ominous than simple stress. Her body was sending alarms, and she couldn't ignore them any longer. Sophia had never been one to snoop. She believed in personal space, understanding that everyone needs a private corner in their home to store items or thoughts they aren't quite ready to share. But her suspicions left her restless, urging her to explore corners she once left alone. Late one afternoon, Marcus had stepped out to run errands. An uneasy sensation pulled Sophia toward his office, a room typically off limits because he claimed it was cluttered with confidential paperwork. Her stomach churned when she saw the desk. Everything was meticulously arranged, folders aligned in perfect symmetry, pens placed parallel, no stray notes. The tidiness unnerved her more than any mess could. Then she spotted a drawer on the far left side, locked tight. She tugged gently, it refused to budge. Her pulse kicked up a notch. She rummaged through the top drawer, searching for a key, eventually finding a small bronze one hidden beneath a stack of business cards. She turned the key in the lock, heart pounding as the drawer clicked open. Inside, she discovered an old envelope, a few receipts, some crumpled sheets of paper, and at the very back, a small bottle with a neatly printed label, scopolamine. The word tugged at a distant memory, she'd heard of it in passing, a potent substance sometimes referred to as the devil's breath. It could cause disorientation, confusion, and memory loss. Her blood ran cold. She lifted the bottle, noticing a tiny measuring dropper taped to the side. Carefully, she placed it back, her mind whirling. This was more than suspicion, this was evidence. If Marcus was in possession of such a substance, what was he doing with it? She also unearthed a short list of cryptic notes, references to time to effect and dosage frequency. She wanted to believe there was some innocent explanation. But her instincts told her otherwise. This was proof that her husband was manipulating something lethal, something designed to rob a person of their memories. She locked the drawer again, replaced the key, and rushed out of the office. Her world felt like it was crumbling, but she had to remain calm. She couldn't risk alerting Marcus to her discovery. Yet she needed to piece together the rest of this puzzle, and fast. That evening, when Marcus went upstairs to shower, Sophia slipped back into the office. Her entire body quivered with nerves, but adrenaline pushed her forward. She had to see if there was anything else she missed. This time, she combed through the drawer more carefully. Beneath the bottle of scopolamine lay a small, folded index card. Unfolding it, she discovered a handwritten recipe that read like an herbal tea formula, listing common ingredients, chamomile, mint, lemon zest. But the final line made her throat tighten in alarm, 2 drops max. Any more will show. The words jumped out at her, a chilling confirmation of her worst fears. Not only was Marcus using scopolamine, but he had a specific plan on how much to administer without drawing suspicion. The concept that he might be slowly drugging her, bit by bit, made her stomach lurch. She felt both sickened and furious. Why was he doing this? Why poison his own wife's morning tea? Was he trying to make her lose her mind, discredit her, or worse? Countless dark possibilities flooded her thoughts. Sophia realized she needed concrete evidence if she was ever to confront him or involve the authorities. But for now, survival was her immediate priority. She stood there, shoulders trembling, mind racing through possible next steps. Confrontation could be dangerous. What if he escalated his plan? But if she stayed quiet and simply pretended not to know, she might continue to be at risk. The silent weight of the secret pressed down on her, making it hard to breathe. At last, she refolded the recipe and placed it back in its hidden spot. She left the drawer exactly as she found it, turned off the lights, and hurried away. She needed a strategy, she couldn't allow herself to become a silent victim in her own home. The next morning, Marcus's mother, Claudia, arrived unannounced. A whirlwind of sharp perfume and pointed smiles, Claudia seemed to fill every corner of the house with her dominating presence. She embraced her son but only patted Sophia's shoulder in a perfunctory greeting. "How's my dear, hardworking Sophia doing these days?" she asked, her tone sweetly condescending. Sophia forced a smile, ignoring the slight. Even before these suspicions had surfaced, Claudia had never truly accepted Sophia as part of the family. She would make subtle remarks, insinuating that Sophia was needy, prone to dramatic exaggerations, or too frail for Marcus's lifestyle. While they sat in the living room, Claudia eyed Sophia's pale complexion. "You look tired, dear," she said, her voice dripping faux concern. "Perhaps you should rest more. A wife's duty is to keep the household in order, not to run around with silly hobbies." Sophia clenched her jaw. If only Claudia knew the truth, how her precious son was quietly poisoning his own wife. A wave of nausea rolled through Sophia, not just from her symptoms, but from the hypocrisy of having to play a polite hostess. Marcus, meanwhile, disappeared into the kitchen, announcing that he'd make tea and coffee. Sophia's heartbeat quickened. Panic flared. Was he planning to serve her a doctored cup right in front of his mother? Or maybe he'd wait until Claudia left. Claudia leaned closer to Sophia once Marcus was gone. "He works so hard, you know," she whispered. "He deserves a woman who can support him without all these problems." Problems? Sophia suspected Claudia meant her recent dizziness or the fact that she'd been missing social events due to her health. The older woman's words felt like thinly veiled accusations. No doubt, Claudia considered Sophia an inconvenience. Sophia swallowed her anger. She needed to remain calm, gather more evidence, and figure out how to get out of this madness. Little did she know, the mother-in-law's presence would soon become a pivotal turn in this twisted plot. Days earlier, Sophia had installed a small nanny cam in the kitchen, primarily to keep an eye on their new puppy whenever they were out. It recorded motion-activated clips that Sophia could view via a phone app. She'd nearly forgotten about it amid all the chaos. That afternoon, once Claudia left and Marcus was busy in his study, Sophia scrolled through the saved video clips. Most showed the puppy trotting around, sniffing cabinets, or napping in a sunbeam. But one file caught her eye. The camera had recorded Marcus alone in the kitchen early that morning. She clicked on it, heart thudding. The footage showed Marcus methodically opening a small bottle and filling a tiny dropper. He hesitated, glancing over his shoulder as if to confirm no one was watching. Then he released 2 careful drops of liquid into a teacup. He replaced the bottle, made sure everything looked normal, and then resumed making toast. Sophia's mouth went dry. This was real, undeniable proof. She replayed the footage, feeling her stomach churn each time she saw those drops fall into the cup. Everything she had feared was validated. Marcus was intentionally dosing her tea, and he seemed frighteningly at ease doing it. She quickly transferred the video to a secret folder on her phone and emailed a copy to herself under a discreet title. If something happened to her, she wanted a trail of evidence to remain. Part of her wanted to confront him immediately, to scream and lash out. But a deeper survival instinct warned her to wait. This recording was a grave mistake on Marcus's part, a mistake that could ultimately save her life. The realization that he might have been at this for weeks, carefully turning up the dosage, fueled Sophia's resolve. She was done being afraid. Whatever came next, she would not be a victim. The next morning, Sophia braced herself for another suspicious cup of tea. She rose from bed and deliberately busied herself in the bathroom for a few extra minutes, giving Marcus time to enact his usual routine if he wanted. When she emerged, she found him waiting with a mug in hand, steam curling from its surface. "Morning," he said, handing her the tea. His eyes scanned her face, searching for some sign of hesitation or fear. She forced a smile. "Thank you, darling," she replied brightly, trying to mimic her old self. Her mind raced with the knowledge of the video footage. There was no doubt in her mind about what lay in that cup. She considered a direct confrontation, but it felt premature. Instead, she raised the mug to her lips, made a show of inhaling the aroma, then pretended to take a sip. In reality, she barely let the liquid touch her lips. Marcus watched her closely. She could feel his gaze digging into her, so she did her best to act casual. "Delicious as always," she lied, placing the mug gently on the nearby windowsill. Marcus nodded, but his expression remained guarded. Inside, she seethed with anger. For him to stand there, forcing calm conversation, while knowingly poisoning her, bordered on the surreal. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she knew she had to maintain composure. When she set the tea down and stepped out of the room, she could sense his eyes following her. But she didn't turn back. She'd come to realize that every moment she stayed alive was another chance to build her case against him. The fake sip was her shield, her silent protest, and it was also a declaration that she would not be an easy mark any longer. Marcus's mother, Claudia, was slated to visit again later that morning. Even before the woman's arrival, Sophia could feel the tension rising in the house. Marcus busied himself, tidying up, making sure every cushion was plumped and every piece of furniture dusted. It was odd to see him so invested in hosting, but Sophia suspected another agenda. Sure enough, Marcus set out 2 teacups in the kitchen, one with the familiar chip. He was intending to offer Sophia more of his special blend, probably in Claudia's presence, hoping it would look like a gesture of hospitality. But Sophia was ready. With trembling hands, she recalled the recipe card's chilling note, 2 drops max. Any more will show. She suspected Marcus would be especially careful today, ensuring no one else, especially his mother, fell ill. Yet life has its unexpected twists. The moment came when Claudia arrived, wearing an expensive scarf and her usual critical expression. Marcus ushered her into the living room, promising to bring tea shortly. Once he stepped out, Sophia lingered in the kitchen. She saw the 2 teacups, both steaming. One was the chipped cup, presumably poisoned for her. The other was a slightly larger porcelain mug that Marcus often gave to guests. Sophia steadied her breath. If she did nothing, she'd be forced to fake another sip, continuing this dangerous dance. But a bold idea took form in her mind. Very quietly, she switched the cups, placing the chipped one where Claudia would sit. She replaced the normal cup where she herself would sit. Her pulse raced at the enormity of what she'd just done. This was no longer about passive resistance, this was a direct counterstrike. She had no intention of harming anyone, but she also refused to be the victim. If Marcus was so confident in his dosage, let him face the consequences. "Everything okay?" Marcus called from around the corner. She jolted, nearly knocking the spoon off the saucer. Fine, she squeaked. Then she carried both cups into the living room with shaky hands, her nerves thrumming like a live wire. Sophia set the cups down on the coffee table. Claudia smiled stiffly, and Marcus joined them a moment later, scanning the mugs. Sophia pretended not to notice his subtle glance, but her heartbeat thundered as she took a seat. Claudia lifted the chipped cup, daintily blowing on the tea before sipping. Thank you, dear, she murmured. This is a new flavor? She took another small sip, her eyebrows knitting together. It tastes different today. Marcus's eyes darted toward Sophia, who simply looked down at her tea. Anxiety coiled in her stomach. She hadn't fully processed the potential severity of what she'd done. It's a special blend, Marcus said smoothly, though Sophia caught a slight quiver in his voice. Just something new I picked up. Claudia nodded but took another sip, as if trying to identify the ingredients. Sophia forced herself to raise her own mug and feign drinking. This time, she didn't have to fake her reaction to the tea smell, it was truly just normal tea. The tension in the air felt suffocating. Sophia half expected Marcus to snatch the cup away from Claudia's hands, or to realize what had happened and hurl accusations. But he did nothing but sip his own coffee, a delicate sweat beating at his temple. Claudia cleared her throat. I can't quite put my finger on the taste, she said, looking at Marcus for an explanation. He shrugged, trying to maintain composure. It might be some added herbs, he offered vaguely. Sophia watched the flicker of panic behind his eyes. In that moment, it wasn't just tea in Claudia's cup, it was the poison Marcus had intended for Sophia. The reality of it made Sophia's stomach churn with both vindication and dread. This was Marcus's twisted plan turned back on him, but it was also a loaded gun with the safety off. No one in that room knew how this would end. It didn't take long for the poison to make its presence known. About 10 minutes after Claudia began sipping her tea, she started to fidget. Her hands shook slightly, and she blinked rapidly as if trying to clear her vision. Sophia's heart pounded in her chest, fear and adrenaline warping her sense of time. She watched Claudia's complexion grow paler. Marcus, too, noticed something was amiss. He set his coffee cup down and leaned forward. Mother? Are you okay? Claudia opened her mouth to respond, but her words came out slurred. Her hand trembled more violently, causing tea to spill onto the saucer. I feel strange, she managed, eyes going unfocused. Marcus shot up from his chair, rushing to his mother's side. Sophia stood as well, shock mingling with guilt. She hadn't expected the effects to be so swift. Claudia tried to stand, but her legs buckled beneath her. Her teacup clattered to the floor, shattering. In seconds, she was on the carpet, body limp, eyelids fluttering. Marcus knelt beside her, shouting her name. Sophia hovered behind him, heart hammering, uncertain if she should dial 911 or let this play out. But seeing Claudia's distress jolted her into action. She grabbed her phone and called for an ambulance, voice shaking as she gave their address. Panic engulfed the house. Marcus cradled his mother's head, eyes wild with fear. Sophia took a step back, reminded of all those times Claudia had dismissed her or made snide remarks. Yet seeing her in this helpless state was jarring. This was still a human being, a mother, who'd just consumed the poison meant for someone else. Behind the chaos, the implications were impossible to ignore. Marcus's plan had backfired spectacularly. And now, he'd have to confront the aftermath. Within minutes, sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder as they closed in on the quiet suburban street. Marcus paced the living room, torn between rage and desperation. He dialed the hospital ahead, urging them to prepare for his mother's arrival. When the paramedics finally burst in, they found Claudia barely conscious, her breathing shallow. They strapped her onto a stretcher with swift efficiency. All the while, Marcus glared at Sophia, eyes blazing with accusations. What did you do? He hissed, the words sharp and biting. Sophia felt her pulse thunder in her ears. She noticed that the paramedics were within earshot, so she tried to stay calm and rational. I drank nothing, she said in a steady voice, meeting his gaze. You tell me what happened to her. For a moment, silence hung between them like a drawn blade. Marcus seemed torn between maintaining a facade and unleashing his fury. His hands clenched into fists, but with the paramedics busy tending to Claudia, he couldn't make a scene without drawing suspicion. One paramedic turned to Sophia, asking questions about possible allergies or medical issues. Marcus interjected, stumbling over an excuse, She's been stressed. Maybe it's her heart. He shot Sophia a glare, warning her not to speak. Sophia could feel the tension radiating from him. She realized that, to the outside world, she was the dutiful wife, and he was the concerned son. Nobody suspected that the real culprit might be standing right there in the living room. As the paramedics carried Claudia out, Marcus rushed behind them, leaving Sophia alone in the aftermath. Shards of the broken teacup glittered on the rug, an eerie reminder of how quickly their morning ritual had devolved into chaos. Sophia followed the ambulance in her own car, trailing behind on the road as her mind replayed every detail of what had just transpired. By the time she arrived at the hospital, Claudia was already being examined. She found Marcus pacing near the waiting area, racked with frustration. A few minutes later, a paramedic approached, holding a plastic evidence bag containing the chipped cup's remnants. He asked quietly, "Do you know what she drank from this morning?" Sophia glanced at Marcus, whose face drained of color. "That's the one he gave me," Sophia answered, her voice calm and clear. "I passed it on." She kept her statement cryptic yet truthful, feeling Marcus's fury radiate beside her. The paramedic arched an eyebrow, sensing the tension between them. "Hospital protocol might require a toxicology check if there's any suspicion of tampering," he explained. "We've seen a few cases recently where ingesting certain chemicals caused similar reactions." Marcus attempted a dismissive shrug, but his features were taut. "I'm sure it's just a bad reaction to something she ate," he muttered. Sophia nodded, deciding to play along for the moment. "Yes, but it's good to be thorough," she added. The paramedic gave a tight smile before walking away with the evidence bag. Left alone, Marcus rounded on her. "Why are you implying something about the tea?" he seethed under his breath. "You're playing a dangerous game, Sophia." She lifted her chin, refusing to be intimidated. "So are you," she whispered, locking eyes with him. A surge of confidence rushed through her. For the first time, she realized she held the advantage. She had the video evidence. She knew the truth. And now, the authorities were one step closer to it as well. 2 days later, the hospital reached out. The toxicology tests on Claudia's blood and the teacup fragments showed traces of a powerful memory-altering agent. Although scopolamine wasn't explicitly named in the initial call to Sophia, the hospital staff's tone was serious. Due to recent local cases involving spiked beverages, the hospital had a protocol to notify law enforcement. Sophia took the call in the privacy of her bedroom. The nurse on the line explained that Claudia was stable but experiencing confusion and mild memory lapses. The authorities would likely reach out for more information, given the suspicious circumstances. After hanging up, Sophia sat on the edge of her bed, phone clenched in her hand. She felt a mixture of relief and dread. This was it, the moment the authorities would start investigating. A barrage of questions flashed in her mind. Would Marcus blame her entirely? Would they suspect him right away? How could she ensure her own safety if he realized his entire plan was unraveling? Claudia's accident had put a spotlight on the household. Sophia was no longer the only one who suspected foul play. Now, the police would be involved. She recalled the nanny cam footage, the scopolamine bottle, and the recipe card. She also remembered the fear that gripped her each time Marcus was near. Amid her swirling thoughts, she wondered if Claudia would even remember the incident. Given the drug's properties, it was possible her recollection would be hazy. Would she recall that Sophia handed her the poisoned cup? Or that Marcus had prepared it? Either way, a storm was brewing. The toxicology results were a turning point, no more hiding in the shadows for Marcus. The evidence spoke loud and clear, and with the police knocking soon, the stage was set for a confrontation that could shatter their world. Late that afternoon, the doorbell rang. Expecting it to be a police officer, Sophia's heart jumped. But when she opened the door, she found their longtime housemaid, Marta, clutching her purse nervously. Marta had been with the family for years, quietly taking care of cleaning and laundry. She rarely spoke more than a polite greeting, always working discreetly. Sophia invited her in. Marta looked troubled, eyes darting around as if afraid of being watched. "Senora," she began, wringing her hands, "I must tell you something about Mr. Marcus. It is important." Sophia guided her to sit on the sofa, offering her a glass of water. Marta took a sip, then hurriedly explained that she'd observed Marcus acting strangely in the pantry for months. He would lock himself inside for minutes at a time. At first, Marta dismissed it as him searching for special ingredients. But then she found small spills, residue that smelled chemical. Once, Marta whispered, voice trembling, "I saw him measuring a clear liquid into a small dropper and writing notes in a journal. He said he was testing microdosing for health benefits, but something felt wrong." Sophia's blood ran cold. Marta's story echoed the scenario she'd uncovered in Marcus's office. It was a relief to hear confirmation from another person, someone who had no reason to lie. But the news also intensified her fear. Marcus's secret experiments had been going on longer than she'd realized, and if he was bold enough to do it in the family home, who knew what else he was capable of? Marta bowed her head apologetically. "I'm sorry I didn't come forward sooner. I was scared. But when I heard about your mother-in-law's collapse, I couldn't keep quiet." Sophia placed her hand on Marta's. "You did the right thing," she said softly. "Thank you for telling me. This could help put a stop to whatever he's doing." In that moment, Sophia realized she wasn't alone in her fight. Someone else in the house had noticed Marcus's dark side. The truth was rising to the surface, inch by inch. Unable to sleep, Sophia rummaged through Marcus's desk after he left for an impromptu meeting. Her stomach churned with nerves, but she knew each moment was precious. This time, she found a hidden folder labeled with only a single initial. Inside were old photographs, news clippings, and an autopsy report bearing the name Elena Navarro. Her pulse hammered. She'd heard whispers that Marcus had been married before, but he'd been evasive about it. She'd asked once, and he'd claimed she'd died in a tragic accident. Now, flipping through the documents, she saw a different story. Elena's death had been attributed to an overdose of prescription medication mixed with alcohol. However, there were notes in the file indicating the coroner found the combination peculiar, raising questions about whether it was accidental or intentional. There was more. Scrawled in the margins were references to dosages, absorption rates, and questions about how certain drugs could mimic medical conditions. The handwriting looked like Marcus's. Sophia's throat tightened at the realization. Had he played a role in his first wife's untimely death, too? She stared at a photo of Elena, a bright-eyed woman, smiling under a summer sun. In another, she looked slightly gaunt, her eyes ringed with exhaustion. Sophia recognized that haunted look. It matched her own reflection lately, burdened by suspicion and toxicity. This revelation crystallized a horrifying truth: Marcus had a history of orchestrating poisonings, or at least controlling substances to manipulate women. The question of why loomed large. Money? Control? Sadistic curiosity? Whatever his motive, Elena's story served as a dire warning for Sophia. If she didn't stop him, she could end up another tragic accident. Clutching the folder, Sophia fought the urge to collapse in tears. Instead, she scanned each page with shaking hands, photographing the most incriminating parts with her phone. Every piece of evidence might be crucial if the authorities needed it. When she closed the folder, her hands felt numb. The first wife nobody talked about was no longer a ghost or a rumor, she was a victim. And Sophia was determined not to be the next. The very next day, a detective named Alvarez reached out, referencing the hospital's report and requesting an interview. Sophia felt her nerves crackle with both anxiety and relief. This was the chance she had been waiting for, a formal investigation. They met in a small conference room at the precinct. Detective Alvarez was a calm, steady presence, his sharp eyes taking in every detail. "We have reason to believe Claudia's collapse might not be accidental," he said, leaning forward. "Any insight you can provide would be helpful." Sophia took a deep breath, then recounted the odd changes in her health, the suspicious tea, the scopolamine bottle she'd found, and the nanny cam footage. She offered him a USB drive with the video clip and the photos of Marcus's hidden documents. Alvarez watched her carefully, occasionally stopping her to clarify a detail. "Why come forward now?" he asked quietly. "I was afraid," Sophia admitted, her voice trembling. "This is my husband, after all, and I didn't know if anyone would believe me." Alvarez nodded, his features softening. "Given the evidence you've brought, we can proceed. But I need your full cooperation and, honestly, your testimony. In exchange, we can arrange protective measures. I'll also push for immediate action if we find enough probable cause." Sophia exhaled shakily. This was it. She was placing her life in the hands of a stranger, albeit a professional one, and wagering her entire future on the truth. She slid the USB drive across the table. "Everything I have is on there," she said. The detective regarded her with a mix of empathy and determination. "We'll review it immediately. If your husband is responsible, we'll make sure justice is served. Until then, be cautious. Act normal. Don't let him suspect we're onto him." Sophia nodded, her heart hammering with both fear and hope. For the first time in weeks, she felt less alone. The law was now on her side. And if all went according to plan, Marcus would soon face the consequences of his monstrous acts. A week later, tension simmered at the house like a pot about to boil over. Claudia had been discharged but was still hazy, recuperating at a relative's home. Marcus had become more guarded, scrutinizing Sophia's every move as if sensing her growing defiance. On an evening glowing with a fiery sunset, Marcus invited a few business associates for dinner. He wanted to maintain an appearance of normalcy, presumably to show he was still in control. Sophia played the part of the gracious hostess, serving hors d'oeuvres with a polite smile, all the while aware that Detective Alvarez was finalizing the case against Marcus. The doorbell rang just as the group sat down to eat. Sophia glanced at Marcus, whose brow furrowed in annoyance. "We're not expecting anyone else," he muttered. He got up and crossed the foyer to open the door. Two uniformed officers and Detective Alvarez stood on the threshold, their expressions stoic. The detective spoke quietly, but the tension carried through the room like an electric current. Sophia set down the serving platter, heart pounding. Marcus's associates looked on in shocked silence. Alvarez's voice was clear and firm. "Marcus Holloway, we have a warrant for your arrest in connection with the suspected poisoning of Claudia Holloway and the attempted poisoning of Sophia Holloway." The color drained from Marcus's face. He stammered, glancing back at his guests, his voice shaking with outrage. "This is insane. There's no proof." But Detective Alvarez stepped forward, cuffs in hand. "We have sufficient evidence, sir. You'll need to come with us." Sophia watched, her breath caught in her throat, as the officers turned Marcus around and snapped the handcuffs on. The business associates, caught in the surreal spectacle, sat frozen. Marcus's eyes locked on Sophia, brimming with malice. "You," he hissed. "You set me up." She looked back at him, nerves raw but resolve unbroken. "I just refuse to drink your tea," she said quietly. He was led away into the fading glow of the sunset, the front door closing on the remnants of his carefully crafted facade. Weeks later, Sophia had settled into a quieter routine. The house felt different, emptier but also free of that oppressive tension. Marcus's trial loomed on the horizon. Claudia, having gradually recovered her mental clarity, requested a private meeting with Sophia. Sophia agreed, albeit nervously, inviting her to the now half-empty home. Claudia arrived looking frail, leaning on a cane for balance. The lines on her face spoke of exhaustion, confusion, and perhaps guilt. She eased into a chair in the living room, glancing around at the once familiar surroundings. "I saw him in jail," Claudia began, voice heavy. "He told me everything was your fault, that you twisted the truth." She paused, her gaze flicking over Sophia with an unreadable intensity. "He's claiming innocence, of course." Sophia resisted the urge to argue, instead meeting Claudia's eyes calmly. "I did what I had to do," she said softly. "He was poisoning me. And you, too, whether he intended to or not." Claudia shook her head, tears brimming in the corners of her eyes. "You destroyed this family," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "Everything we built, gone." Sophia exhaled, a mix of sorrow and indignation rising in her chest. "I'm sorry you feel that way. But the truth is, he poisoned it long before I ever sipped." They sat in silence, the enormity of the tragedy echoing in the walls. Claudia's breathing grew uneven. She wiped her eyes, then carefully rose to leave. At the doorway, she hesitated and glanced back, her features softened. Maybe one day we'll speak again," she murmured before walking out, leaning on her cane. The door closed behind her with a quiet click, leaving Sophia alone in the house that no longer felt like a trap. Though the future remained uncertain, she knew she had saved herself from a fate that once seemed inescapable. In her new apartment, far from the haunting memories of that house, Sophia breathed in the morning air. It was a modest one-bedroom with sparse furniture, but it felt cozy and entirely her own. The morning sun bathed the living area in soft light, illuminating the small kitchenette where she now stood, preparing her tea. She reached for the kettle, feeling an unexpected tremor of nostalgia. After all the terror associated with a single cup of tea, she'd avoided drinking it for weeks. But now, she felt ready to reclaim her mornings, her sense of normalcy. As the water boiled, she reflected on everything she'd lost and gained. Marcus faced multiple charges, including attempted murder. The case against him was strong, bolstered by the nanny cam footage, the toxicology reports, and the hidden documents detailing Elena Navarro's suspicious death. Sophia felt a pang of sorrow for Elena and a surge of determination to see justice served in her memory. She poured the steaming water into a simple ceramic mug she'd picked out herself, no chips, no hidden significance. Just a clean slate. Adding a touch of honey, she stirred slowly, the swirl of the spoon a soothing, rhythmic sound. Lifting the cup to her lips, she inhaled the comforting aroma. This time, there was no bitter tang, no metallic undertone, no covert scheme. Just a warm, inviting brew that smelled of fresh possibilities. Sophia took a delicate sip, savoring the flavor, relief washing over her. In that moment, she finally felt free. Free from the fear that had shadowed her every step. Free from the constraints of a marriage twisted by betrayal. Free to build a life on her own terms. Setting the cup down, she smiled to herself. A new day had truly begun, and she was determined never again to be a silent victim in someone else's dangerous game.